Hey, this is Mike from xparticles.com. In this video tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to get motion blur with xparticles. Now, there's a couple of ways to do it, and the first one we'll look at is how to get motion blur using the standard xparticles material. I've got this simple scene where I'm just emitting a bunch of particles, and they're moving quite quickly, so we should get some nice motion blur. That is just done with two turbulence modifiers and an emitter set to spherical mode. So emitting 50,000 particles, and I've got a standard xparticles material on it. Now by default, if we render that, it's going to render the material as points because that's what it is, it's a point renderer. I've also got it set to additive mode. Now if I render, it is just going to render every frame like this, and that's not going to give us any motion blur. So how to get motion blur on this is we need to do a couple of things. First thing we need to do is to cache it. So we go to our system, go to other objects, choose the cache object, and we will simply build the cache. So let that run through. Okay, so now it's cached. That's all good and fine. It's still going to render points. So the next thing we need to do is, with this material we can't motion blur with physical render, but we can do it with the standard render, and to do that you need a motion blur tag. So go to your cinema tags, add a motion blur tag, then in your cinema settings, or your render settings I should say, you want to add a subframe motion blur effect, and this is a post effect, so it's going to blur it after the fact, but it's set to 16 samples. That means you're going to get it every 16 times, it'll blur it out. So then let's just quickly save this out. I'll leave everything to default, and then I'll just set it folder, call this motion blur standard. Okay, and so we've got everything set up. We've got our motion blur post effect, we've got our motion blur tag, and now cached scene. So next thing, just tell it I'm not going to do it so big. Just do PAL and all frames, and let's hit render. So Control Shift R. Wrong screen. And it's going to render out, and you can see it'll render, and then it'll hit the motion blur pass. So if I scroll back, you can see the motion blur in effect, and it's pretty quick. You can see how quickly that's going through. So what I'll do is I'll quickly pause this and let it finish its render. Okay, so we're at our last couple of frames here, and it's taken just over 5 minutes, which isn't too bad for a full motion blur scene. It's almost finished. I think one more frame to go, and we're done. So let's push play. So there you can see full motion blur on the xparticles material, and you know, a lot of people didn't realize that this is actually possible, but so we thought we'd show everyone how to do it. And it's, you know, it's simple, looks great, and that's it working on the xparticles material. So the other way to do it is, I've got another scene here, and it's the same scene, but we've got some geometry instead of xparticles material. We've got these little dots, and so we want to add motion blur to these. Well, the only way to do that is to use the physical renderer. So let's go to our render settings, change our renderer to physical render, and enable motion blur for that. But again, we need to cache the scene, so I'm going to simply cache that up. Book cache. And when it's cached, it's going to add this tag to the generator. We don't want that because we need them to be uncached, or the generator object. We don't want that to talk to the cache. We just want the particles. Okay, so let's see how we get on with this one. something else, call it physical, and we'll hit render. Oops, that's not right. Let's go to our output, change that to PAL and all frames, and just change my sampler quality to automatic. I'll leave the shading threshold at 20 and see how we get on there. So you can see straight away motion blur on these guys, and again it's pretty quick. I'm using fairly low settings though, but this is just to illustrate the possibilities of using motion blur with Xparticles, as a lot of people are asking how to do it, so we thought we'd show you. And that's two ways to do it, straight within Cinema 4D instead of having to go into post. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'll pause this video and let this go through, and then we can play it again. Okay, so we're on the last couple of frames, and that was only a couple of minutes, just under 3 to render. But you can see just how much smoother the motion becomes when you add a bit of motion blur to your particles. They sort of flow around a lot nicer because they've got these little trails that just sort of keep it more fluid. And that's the beauty of having motion blur within your scene. So that's how to do it, and we will be back with more tutorials soon.